it's Cassia Streb with Music for Your Inbox and our Artist Chat series. I'm going to be calling Dr. Sepand Shahab today to talk about his work in the field of experimental musicology. He created a lecture that was opening for Liam Mooney's piece, and we thought we'd like to ask him a little bit about the field of experimental musicology and also what prompted him to invent it. Let me just take a moment right now to invite Sepand.
Hello.
Hi.
I told everyone we were interviewing the Dr. Sepand Shahab in the field of experimental musicology, seeing as how you are the self-proclaimed, I suppose, founder of experimental musicology, or at least the person who has brought it into our modern parlance.
Maybe. I mean, I didn't really do it, I'm finishing my PhD right now. And one thing they teach you is, you have to go out and find, what everyone else has done in the field. So I can't say for sure that I created it or that there's not someone else there's probably someone else doing something similar somewhere in the world.
Well, you're the first person that I have heard use this term, and I thought we could talk a little bit about the kind of foundational principle. I've seen your lecture, several times, clearly through the film that we're presenting, but also I saw an early iteration of it at the Dog Star Festival in, I think it was 2024. So could you talk a little bit about the opening part where you're saying that sort of the Western classical musicology is its relationship to insight versus inspiration versus the fake musicological relationship to insight versus inspiration?
Yeah, I guess it was when I did there was another time that I did something with Liam with a kind of this presentation or lecture, and it was at that venue trade school.
Right.
And I remember one of the co-founders of that space, Arden, came up to me afterwards, and they were very excited and said they loved that it seemed to be about this kind of picking up a thread that we don't really take seriously in academia anymore. Maybe something, it would be what if scholarship kind of stayed how it was in the 19th century or something, where it was a lot less rigorous, and even just things like music criticism back then were very could be very poetic or kind of and not so rigorous. So and I thought the way that Arden put it was really good, that it's kind of just trying to see if there's any value in this other way of engaging with kind of academic thinking that was done in the past, and there's probably other corners of that to also explore besides just kind of being more creative or even silly, what I'm trying to do now. But that's really where it came from.
Yeah, because it seems like you're sort of subverting the whole thing. I mean, to give a lecture, in this case, we would cast you in an armchair with a flip chart, and you had all the tropes and stuff, but then to really dive into what is creating inspiration in the world, and like you say, this bridge between academia and the practical application of art making, because I know that you have a background in composition and performance, and then that you've come into musicology sort of after with this the opposite view. Which is a very common thing. I don't want to say that in itself is unique, but I'm saying that the perspective you bring is different than a person who would have started out in musicology and then just continued on the road of academia. Do you feel like I always call it sort of in the field and in the lab. Do you feel like your work in the field, meaning through being a composer and kind of putting yourself on the line? I've been to pieces that you've composed in the past or ideas that you've had, and it's a really vulnerable act to put out a piece of art in the world and let the world judge it. Whereas academia, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that it's kind of cloaked in this, I'm following the rules, so therefore you cannot fault me for any of this. And I'm curious if that influence of being a composer in the real world before finishing this latest degree in academia, if that kind of influenced it, is it was giving you this new perspective?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about this recently because, I guess the only thing, most of the degree that I'm doing, I was actually doing a DMA in harpsichord performance.
Yeah.
And at the very end, the only thing that really makes what I'm doing right now a musicology degree is because of that I have to write a dissertation now. and I still, yeah, I do really feel like, so it just, as I walk around in life, I more still just feel like the person that, I do pieces or like installations and things. But yet it is funny because I was trying to figure out, since it doesn't feel like there's so much of any kind of musicology that I've learned like in this. It just sounds like it feels like just some silly piece that I made up. But yeah, I can't say for sure if I would have thought of it if I didn't just switch my degree to musicology, but I don't understand how that could be, since it doesn't feel like that significant. I guess it just really speaks to that we are really, whatever's going on in our lives, it is going to inform your creative practice somehow. So even if I never finish my dissertation and this is all that comes out of like trying to do this musicology degree, that'll be great too. But I am really going to try to finish it.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll finish it. I have complete faith in your ability to finish this degree. Let's just put that out there. I think there's something about, so just so we can provide some context for people like watching, you were tasked with creating something artistic to contextualize Liam Mooney's construction of a like balloon membrane vacuum powered PVC pipe organ that he developed based on some plans that he read in a Bart Hopkin instrument design book. And you've often worked kind of in parallel with Liam or alongside Liam or like directly with him, or I mean, we've all sort of a lot of Liam's pieces are really participatory, so we've kind of all been, rubbing dry ice on something or listening to things really closely. That's what's so fantastic about them. They kind of are community building in and of themselves. And so I had seen, not the live show, but I saw a video of the trade school show where you were actually getting Liam to, I mean, he was doing jumping jacks. You were asking him to be like really involved in your lecture. And so I'm wondering, did knowing that Liam's video was going to start right after your lecture kind of influence what you were doing in the lecture, or did you feel like it's sort of two separate pieces?
Yeah, I did think that, like the video that we did for Music for Your Inbox, that was the first time, as you kind of pointed out earlier, that I didn't have like a sound component going on. Like for the trade school show, I did these weird little like synthesizer pieces that were still somehow tied to Liam's work. And for the original show in the garden, there was, this like interactive installation. So in this context, I was just thinking of, because I had heard the vacuum drums before, and I was just trying to provide like maximum contrast. And I just thought that the sonics of the vacuum drums are just like, there's so much in there. It's like so rich and like so omnipresent. And so the biggest thing I was thinking was that if I could figure out a way to do one of these that didn't have like it's like the first time probably ever, I think, that I've ever done anything that didn't have like a music part to it. Because I thought like that part is like really like really handled on this video. Like there's so much to listen for in there, and there's so much. I didn't want to like steal away any part of anyone's like concentration on that. So I just thought it would be the most contrast and to have something, just without sound, and then there is kind of a link between instrument building and music. I don't know. It does feel somehow related.
Oh, it absolutely does. It feels like, to me, when I'm watching the film, I feel like you're asking people, and I could get this backwards, but it sounds like you're asking people that instead of studying all of, Western music, classical Western musical history, and then gaining some insight and then following that towards inspiration, you're asking people to start with inspiration and see if that leads them to insight. Is that the accurate? I didn't flip those by accident. Okay, so it seems like you're saying that, here's Liam, like, I don't know, I'm imagining him reading a book in Mount Washington and being like, and then heading over to the Home Depot at the bottom of Figueroa there and sort of like loading up a cart and going home and just kind of trying to see like if this theoretical thing is possible. And there's a lot of curiosity in that and a lot of yes, or what if. And I think you're pointing out that it's possible to study things so much that you kind of we lose all of that. Not to say that I really don't want to say that musicology is bad, because I really think that it's important to study history and to understand how these things came to be. But to think of that as an access point to creativity is perhaps wrong, or perhaps, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Like, what do you think the impact of going deep into the history of music is in terms of your creative life? Does it help bolster it, or does it kind of squish it down a bit?
No, I think, well, it's so hard to say because I spent so many years like, really nerding out on music and stuff, especially like when I was an undergrad. I was like really interested in reading about everything. So yeah, like I definitely don't want to downplay that at all. I mean, this just might be my reaction to like feeling like myself. I've now spent like too much time in school or something. Also just, I think just a reflection of maybe the times that I just feel like it's, it feels good to do something silly. Um, but no, yeah, I wouldn't want to like downplay. I mean, I still love reading books by some musicologists, and they're super thought-provoking and insightful. I just think there's another track that used to exist. Like it was really like a main part of like academic culture, and that doesn't really get taken seriously anymore, maybe. And I just wanted to like show what you could do with that, and that it could actually have like real, uh, it has like creative implications and can be substantive. It's not just like, because they tend to say, sometimes when you're learning about sources and stuff, when you're first starting like one of these degrees, they'll say like, well, you have to like, they kind of maybe make you feel like you can throw away things that are like written before like a certain year or you have to be really careful with it. And, I just wanted to say that maybe there's another angle to look at those things where there's something in there that is interesting.
So so it sounds like I'm hearing you say that a person in the field of academia and research of Western classical music, they could be encouraged to not rely on sources before a date that did not employ the same academic rigorous standards as we have today. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or that, yeah, like, I mean, I guess obviously not, if it's like a primary source from like the 18th century or something like that, but like, things in like the early 20th century, they didn't, the doctoral programs and stuff weren't the same as what they are now. So they didn't have the same. So you're supposed to be more careful, like when you read those things. But yeah, that's just like one little part of it to think about. I think is that, yeah, there, if you come at it from a completely different mindset, there could be things in there that are really interesting.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure that there's like obvious reasons to avoid a lot of that stuff. But I think yeah, I mean I think that your lecture feels, in fact, I mean it's hilarious, right? I mean, it is like so funny. Sitting there with the headphones on in the room recording it next to Colin Wamsgans, like we were doing everything we could not to ruin the take by just like screaming and laughing out loud. And so I'm wondering if that's but it's also coming from this really like researched point of view, because you have read so much and you have like what you're talking about when you're talking about these things. And I think that there's there's something about the way that you're telling the story that makes me feel how I feel when I'm at the Museum of Jurassic Technology, where I am really studying the history of something or going through one of their displays and realizing that what I'm reading about, this like long story of some family lineage, is probably not true. Maybe it's true, but also I don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like and of course that's a sort of a dangerous thing. Like is history true or not is sort of a dangerous thing to think about. And I'm curious if that is sort of a line that you're walking as well. Like if you feel, because I know you've been to MJT before, do you feel sort of like a kinship to what they're up to, or is it just very separate?
Yeah, now that you mention it, I mean, I feel like that's like I can't even think of a better example of this kind of idea, like being realized. And yeah, I mean, it's such an amazing place, and it really does. I mean, just having the word technology in the name of the place, it kind of gives it, I remember, if I if I could try to think back to like before I ever went there, trying to imagine like what it was. Yeah, it does make it sound like something that will be like kind of scientific or yeah, I don't know. But yeah, you're totally right that I think that's like the most perfect realization of this
Yeah,
kind
because
of
you're
vibe.
definitely um like there are facts in there that I'm reasonably certain would be true or real, but then also if they're completely made up. Like I'm thinking, for instance, when you are referring to Robert Ball, this like what did you call experimental archaeologist,
Oh yeah, yeah.
who got a brain aneurysm from blowing air through a ram's horn.
Which I gotta say,
Um,
so that story actually came from a legitimate musicological essay. Just to
Right, and
point
that's
out.
but I'm
Yeah.
saying like, but you also could have made it up, and
Hmm.
in that moment, in the way that you have woven the narrative to that point, I no longer care whether or not it's true, kind of thing,
Hmm.
and that's a really powerful thing because you're able to spark imagination and curiosity and get this sort of inspiration that you're looking for. I'm curious if you've because I don't want to spoil the whole like lecture because it's so lovely and delightful and folks should just subscribe or get a ticket and watch it themselves. It is comedy gold, but also it's one of those things I've watched it so many times clearly, through the editing process, but I still think about it, like it kind of in the moment you're laughing and that's the access point to it is the humor and the timing is great. And your character is amazing. But afterwards you really think about it because there's this point when you mention medieval music and you talk about it being sort of the most inscrutable part of early musicology and like not early musicology but musicology of early music. And I remember being in my undergrad in that music 101 class and like watching that and feeling like, okay, sure. But there's that sort of like aspect of emperor's new clothes, like, oh, maybe I'm the only one feeling this way. And for you to just say it out loud is like, this part doesn't actually make any sense, but we've just decided that it does. That was very cathartic.
Yeah, and I know there's been, I can't say exactly, but there's been a lot written about this idea that what do we actually, when we are trying to realize like medieval music, maybe like as part of like the early music movement in terms of like trying to do it, maybe like how they would have done it. It's by far like we don't really know anything about it. And so then it becomes really interesting to think about like what are we actually doing when we're trying to play this music. And it really is like not, I guess, in this day and age where we're kind of used to like, you can know everything instantly and because you can pick up this little device that's in your pocket and search things. I mean, it's like it's so nice to have these things that are just so lost to time and see there's like all these different ways to like use it and fill in the gaps and just imagine things. That yeah, I think
Yeah, well, I
medieval
mean,
music is like a really beautiful like Western example of that.
yes, and you have such a like because you focus on harpsichord as an instrument, and like you've had tons of exposure to this early music and the sort of shenanigans that people spew about, oh, well, this is the correct performance practice for this or that. And you're like, based on what audio recording? Like, and I'm a string player. And so, of course, that feeds into it too. Like, oh, play this part like a viol. And you're like, okay, well, based on the fact that we sort of know what these were made out of, and we pretty much know what a human can do because that hasn't changed much. And then everything else is just this squishy guesswork in the middle. And that's why I think I just sort of fled to contemporary music because I was like, all right, I would love to speak to people who are alive and tell me how to play this piece, um, rather than this kind of like, it's like when people talk about the outcome of a potential sporting event or something. Like, well, if this
Oh
team
yeah.
does that and this team does that, then this will happen. And you're like, I am so bored.
Yeah, I mean to me
But you,
yeah, go ahead.
no, 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 you go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah, to me I really got attracted to early music just because of it just sounds really new and vibrant to me and some even either repertoire that just didn't really never really got my attention if just using the harpsichord example like played on piano it just would sound silly or pieces that like I knew and loved like Beethoven symphonies but then was like a period orchestra and all their ideas whether they're like um authentic or not to use that word it just really just hit me emotionally and I was like wow this feels like hearing it for the first time, but there's even more in there. And that was really the only thing I ever cared about was early music.
Yeah, and I think that
Personally.
it's yeah, no, I think that's what I'm asking about is your opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what really comes through in your lecture. I wanted to briefly ask you about like another piece that I know you did really recently for the LA Roads concert on the Rim of the World highway, where you had a rest stop for introverts, I think that's what you called it.
Yeah.
And that piece was really different than this lecture. Could you kind of describe what that was, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about how that fits into like the larger practice of what you're up to?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So now, okay. Earlier I said that this was the only thing I did without sound, but now you just reminded me that the introvert rest stop also. Yeah, it was Steven Van Dyke. He's been organizing these road concerts for a long time, where there'll be like a long strip of road somewhere. This one was up in Crestline, the Rim of the World Highway, and with people doing like performances or having installations and art all along it. So I was kind of like on the outskirts at this like there was like this baseball field that I was just allowed to do whatever I wanted. And so again, like I just feel like my mind, I'm trying to go to like silly things or nostalgic. Maybe as I get older, nostalgia is becoming part of something that so I thought it would be fun if people, I just brought a bunch of like pillows and sheets and stuff and made like two kind of like bases like far away from each other, where people could make a little like pillow fort and just kind of like hide out in there. And and then the other part that I was really hoping would happen would be that there would be like two people that didn't know each other, like one in each one. And then I would run back and forth between the two pillow houses and they could like have a conversation like through me where they would like ask questions and stuff. And we ended up doing that a couple times and it was really interesting. Like there was like no small talk. Like people were asking complete strangers like these really profound questions, and I had the best time. It was like I really had a great time doing that. I wish it didn't happen as often. I was really kind of like out, not in like the main area, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I definitely want to do this idea again somewhere. It would be fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got another show on April
Oh,
26th in
yeah,
Highland Park, so get your
yeah,
application in, kiddo. That would be
yeah,
that would be great because I think that it's when you're talking about nostalgia and stuff, it's reminding me of well, actually, I was at the park on whatever Sunday. I think it was yesterday or Saturday. Anyhow, we were at Elysian Park and my kids found a note in a tree from a different kid. You know, they were climbing a tree and they found this note and then it asked a question and they were like, we have to have a pen. We have to answer this note, you know, and it was, I wasn't paying attention to any of that. I just gave them a pen. I don't know what the question was and I don't know what they wrote as an answer, but I'm saying that these like this idea of like incredibly slow communication, what would you say to somebody
yeah.
versus like an actual small talk? I mean, and also I think what people don't realize is when you say you were running between them, you were in fact running between them. You weren't just
Yeah,
like
I was super fired up. I was definitely, and it was a
yeah,
baseball field,
exactly.
so
Right.
yeah,
No, but that's also I think points to the urgency of the questions. Like if you're like, holy smokes, we're gonna make this person run,
yeah.
like what is the message I'm hoping to receive or to like communicate to them. Um yeah, so that I mean obviously I'm not gonna like tell your business, but I really think you should do that in the
No, thanks. And that was
he's
another
doing
thing
it.
that, it was partially birthed that, it was one of these Dogstar concerts where I had I just, I don't know, I had this idea. I just like the idea of people being like under sheets or in their own little private space. I guess that's like the introvert part of it. And so I did try, I set that up at the Dogstar concert, I think last year or the year before, like at the intermission, there were like these sheets that you could go under. So I think it was just another iteration of that. So I think a lot of these things somehow start at Dogstar events.
Yeah, did you build a lot of forts and stuff like that when you were a kid? Is that what you're referencing? Because there's a lot of linens
Partially.
in your work.
Yeah, I guess partially. I definitely remember doing it and just like the feeling of being in your own little private space, especially I guess the one at the Dogstar show. I thought it would just be nice to, sometimes when you're like in a big crowded room, it is kind of nice if you can just go, at least I think, in a little space where you can just be by yourself. So, and there were like the people that really came out to that space, to that baseball field, that kind of had to make like extra effort to go out there. They all mentioned, they were like, well, I saw introverts, and and so I had to come. Or somebody was like, introverts unite or something. So I think I wasn't expecting that word to like really grab people, but now in retrospect, it makes sense.
Well, I think it's a great word in a situation, especially where it's kind of like that. Those LA Rhodes concerts kind of point to audience participation, whether like overtly or just kind of in through the subtext of it, where they say, walk along. I mean, obviously not walk through the World Highway, but in New York version of it, it's happening in April. They're saying, you can walk, drive, bike the 3 miles of York between Eagle Rock and the 110 freeway, sort of close to South Pass, and you'll experience all these things. And so there's a certain element of like, oh, I'm just kind of like going to end up in the middle of someone's art piece. And so the fact that you're really saying like, this is a place that is safe if you want to not participate. And, but you're also pointing at the introvert still wanting to communicate and to be engaged in the rest of the world. You're not saying that, because you're asking them to gain insight as they're under these sheets or to communicate with somebody else. And I found that kind of a specific point of view on being an introvert. It's not being socially isolated. It's just not wanting to necessarily talk all the time.
Yeah, so yeah, you could either kind of have this mediated conversation, or like I had some oranges, and I thought you could just like send the other person an orange if you want to. I see that Corey is watching this video, so maybe I could have also had some persimmons that could be
Oh,
sent back
yeah.
and forth. He has like showed me the amazing flavor of persimmons recently.
Yeah, he's I started when I was walking late at night during the pandemic, because there's like nothing else to do. I would spot these persimmon trees, like just full of persimmons, and be like, oh man, I gotta text him this location. Yeah, I think offering people food or some kind of snack is also a nice entry point to a conversation. So are you thinking about possibly extending this practice of experimental musicology, like for a different, because I know you have one exercise in the video you made, wriggling over reading material. I'm curious if you have other, I don't know, little seeds of ideas about um, kind of developing I don't want to say motivational speaker, but it's more like a pre-concert talk, but that's not directly about what's going to happen. It's more like setting the frame for what's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess not. I've had like just a few half ideas that I think I can remember like one of them, but yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I'd either have to wait until I feel like I really come up with something um, that would hopefully be interesting again, or it would have to be someone would ask me to do it, and then I would have to come up with something. But I
Right.
think, yeah, left to my own devices, I don't feel like it's not guaranteed that I would come up with it again. I just feel like the topic, especially the video that we did together, the way that came together was so, I just was so, it felt, to me, it felt so lucky and weird the way it kind of, all the whole story kind of came together, that it just really felt like, wow, I don't know if I'll be able to like string something like this together again, or at least for a long time, but I hope so, because it was really fun. And I think, yeah, whatever thing I do next, I think it'll have the same vibe of being funny or silly. But yeah, I think your idea of like doing some kind of pre-concert, that would be interesting, to try to put something like that together, or like liner notes for like someone's CD or something.
Yeah.
Could be possible. Yeah, because
Yeah,
those are like, how
absolutely.
many like academic liner notes do we need? Well, I'm thinking about like early music recordings and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If it's sort of like setting the tone for like delight and curiosity and intrigue and discovery, as opposed to telling people what's going to happen and how many
Yeah.
minutes it's going to last and
Yeah.
what they should
Or
notice.
or like giving you the information about the composer that you can just look up online like so easily. I guess it's nice to have it in a little booklet in your hand, but it seems to be, because everyone, it seems like artists or whoever writes the notes, they're like, they get credit for it. It just seems more about like showing off that you. Okay, no, I shouldn't say that. Sorry, I'm being like too negative now.
No, I don't know if it's too negative. I think you're just pointing out something that it's like, are you doing something because you're trying to, like, I feel like what you're trying to contribute to, like, us out in the experimental music world is to say, like, academia has a place in your work, and here's potentially an entry point. Here's potentially something that you might find useful. And it's not really about you gaining accolades as, like, a scholarly person in the world and trying to climb some invisible ladder of I don't know what. And you're thinking about your contribution to the community and not necessarily like what you're extracting. Because a lot of your events have been participatory in some level. Not that what I think an aspect I really like about your work is that you invite participation, but it's not obligatory. And if you don't participate, the piece still works. Which is kind of something I look for in my own work. But if they do participate, they get a lot more out of it. Like climbing under a blanket in the back of Heather and Clay's backyard I think it was like 98 degrees.
I was really surprised how many people did that in that weather.
Yeah, but it was because you had framed it in this way of like, how could they not? I mean, the other thing you could do is start a cult, which I feel like you'd be wildly successful at.
I see myself more as a cult joiner than a starter, maybe.
Well, anyhow, I wanted to thank you, Sepand, for like kind of just letting Jen and I ask you to do this thing and like delivering, and also just letting us film it and work on it and shape it into something, because I know that I don't know, it just takes a lot of vulnerability to open up something like this and let us edit it into pieces, and then it just goes straight into Liam, which is like
No,
which
really,
it is.
thank you all. I had so much fun, and it was like I really learned so much from seeing how you worked and interact with the people that you're filming. It was really like I've actually used stuff that you all were doing. Like
Great.
it was really helpful. So I really thank you all.
Cool. Well, this certainly won't be our last collaboration with you for sure. And maybe we'll just force you we'll give you another deadline.
Okay, yeah, that's the best way.
All right. Well, take care, Sepand. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.